have discussed about the end of the civilization. Yes. So how the Harappan civilization was ended? So there are a number of reasons which are suggesting the downfall of the Harappan civilization. One of the prominent being the floods, deforestation, and shifting and drying up of the rivers. Okay. So this much things we have discussed. Let us discuss about the discovery discovering the Harappan civilization. So far, we have examined facets of the Harappan civilization in the context of how archaeologists have used evidence from material remains to piece together parts of a fascinating history. However, there is another story as well about how archaeologists discovered the civilization. When Harappan cities fell into ruin, people gradually forgot all about them. When men and women began living in the area millennia later, they did not know about what to make of the strange artifacts that occasionally surfaced, washed by floods or exposed by soil erosion, or turned up while plowing a field or digging for treasure. Cunningham's confusion. When Cunningham, the first general director of the ESI, began archaeological excavation in the mid 19th century, archaeologists preferred to use the written word, text, and inscription as a guide to investigations. In fact, Cunningham's main interest was in the archaeology of the early historic historic and later periods. He used accounts left by Chinese Buddhist pilgrims who had visited the subcontinent between the 4th and 17th century to locate early settlements. Cunningham also collected documented translated inscriptions found during his surveys. When he excavated sites, he intended to recover artifacts that he thought had cultural value. A site like Harappa, which was not part of the itinerary of the Chinese pilgrims and was not known as an early historic city, did not fit very neatly within his framework of investigation. So, although Harappan artifacts were found fairly often during the 19th century, and some of these reached Cunningham, he did not realize how old these were. Harappan seal was given to Cunningham by an Englishman. He noted the object but unsuccessfully tried to place it within the time frame with which he was familiar. This was because he, like many others, thought that Indian history began with the first cities in the Ganga Valley. Given his specific focus, it is not surprising that he missed the significance of Harappa. Just now, moving forward, a new old civilization. Subsequently, seals were discovered at Harappa by archaeologists such as Dayaram Sani in the early decades of the 20th century in layers that were definitely much older than early historic tables. It was then that their significance began to be realized. Another archaeologist, Rakhal Das Banerjee, found similar seals at Mohenjo-daro, leading to the conjecture that these sites were part of a single archaeological culture. Based on these finds, in 1924, John Marshall, Director General of ASI, announced the discovery of new civilization in the Indus Valley to the world. As S. N. Roy noted in the story of Indian archaeology, Marshall left India 3,000 years older than he had found her. This was because similar, till then unidentified seals were found at excavations at Mesopotamian sites. It was then that the world knew not only of a new civilization but also of a new contemporaneous with Mesopotamia. In fact, John Marshall's stint as general as Director General of the ASI, marked a major change in Indian archaeology. He was the first professional archaeologist to work in India and brought his experience of working in Greece and Crete Crete to the field. More importantly, though like Cunningham, he too was interested in spectacular finds. He was equally keen to look for patterns of everyday life. Marshall tended to excavate along regular horizontal units measured uniformly throughout the mound, ignoring the stratigraphy of the site. This meant that all the artifacts recovered from the same unit were grouped together, even if they were found at different stratigraphic layers. Sites, mounds, and layers. What does mean by mounds? Let me just find out. MOU. What is it? MOUNDS, mounds meaning. Oh, internet is not on, so let me get the internet connection. Meanwhile, let us see. Archaeological sites are formed through the production, use, and discarding of materials and structure. Around it, mass projecting above a surface, a large pile of quantity of something. Don't understand it. Oh, this is a mound. Oh, I now I understood. It is kind of cover. Archaeological sites are formed through the production, use, and discarding of materials and structures. When people continue to live in the same place, their constant use and reuse of the landscape results in the build-up of occupation debris called a mound. Uh, Belief or permanent abandonment results in alteration of the landscape by wind or water activity and erosion. Occupations are detected by traces of ancient materials found in layers, which differ from one another in color, texture, and artifacts that are found in them. Methods reactions what are called sterile layers can be identified by the absence of such traces. Generally, the lowest layers are the oldest and the highest are the most recent. The study of these layers is called stratigraphy. Artifacts found in layers can be assigned to specific cultural periods and can thus provide the actual sequence for the site. Now, as a result, valuable information about the context of these finds are irre- irretrievably lost. New techniques and questions. It was R.E.M. Wheeler, after he took over as Director General of ASI in 1944, who rectified this problem. Wheeler recognized that it was necessary to follow the stratigraphy of the mount rather than the along horizontal lines. Moreover, as an ex-army brigadier, he brought with him a military precision to the practice of archaeology. The frontier of the Harappan civilization have little or no connection with present-day national boundaries. However, with the partition of the subcontinent and the creation of Pakistan, the major sites are now in Pakistani territory. This has spurred Indian archaeologists to try and locate sites in India. An extensive survey in Kutch has revealed a number of Harappan settlements, and explorations in Punjab and Haryana have added to the list of Harappan sites. While Kalibangan, Lokthal, Rakhi, Garhi, and most recently Dholavira have been discovered, explored, and excavated as part of these efforts, press explorations continue. Over the decades, new issues have assumed importance where some archaeologists are often keen to obtain a culture sequence, others try to understand the logic underlying the location of specific sites. They also grapple with the wealth of artifacts, trying to figure out the functions these may have served. Since the 1980s, there has also been growing international interest in Harappan archaeology. Specialists from the subcontinent and abroad have been jointly working at both Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. They're using modern scientific, including surface exploration, to recover traces of clay, stone, metal, and plant and animal remains, as well as to minutely analyze every scrap of available evidence. These explorations promise to yield interesting results in the future. Wheeler at Harappa. Wheeler at Harappa. Early archaeologists were often driven by a sense of adventure. This is what Wheeler wrote about his experience. It was one I call problems of piecing together the past. As we have seen, it is not the Harappan script that helps in understanding the ancient civilization. Rather, it is material evidence that allows archaeologists to better reconstruct Harappan life. This material could be pottery, tools, ornaments, household objects, etc. Organic materials such as cloth, leather, food, and reeds generally decompose, especially in tropical regions. What survive are stone, burnt clay, or terracotta, metal, etc. It is also important to remember that only broken or useless objects would have been thrown away. Other things would probably have been recycled. Consequently, valuable artifacts that are found intact were either lost in the past or hoarded and never retrieved. In other words, such finds are accidental rather than typical. Classifying finds. Recovering artifacts is just the beginning of the archaeological enterprise. Archaeologists then classify their finds. One simple principle of classification is in terms of material such as stone, clay, metal, bone, ivory, etc. The second and more complicated is in terms of function. Archaeologists have to decide whether, for instance, an artifact is a tool or an ornament or both or something meant for ritual use. An understanding of the function of an artifact is often shaped by its resemblance with present-day things. Reeds, quains, stone village, pots are obvious examples. Archaeologists also try to identify the function of an artifact by investigating the context in which it was found. Was it found in a house, in a drain, in a grave, in a kiln? Sometimes archaeologists have to take recourse to indirect evidence. For instance, though there are traces of cotton at some Harappan sites, to find out about clothing, we have to depend on indirect evidence, including depictions in sculpture. Archaeologists have to develop frames of reference. We have seen that the first Harappan seal that was found could not be understood till archaeologists had a context in which to place it, both in terms of the culture sequence in which it was found and in terms of comparison with finds in Mesopotamia. Problems of interpretation. Problems of interpretation. The problems of archaeological interpretation are perhaps most evident in attempts to reconstruct religious practices. Earlier archaeologists thought that certain objects which seemed unusual or unfamiliar may have had a religious significance. These included terracotta figures of women, heavily veiled, some with elaborate headdresses. These were regarded as mother goddesses. These were regarded as mother goddesses. Now, a rare stone statuary of man in an almost standardized posture, seated with one hand and knee, such as the priest king, was also similarly classified. In other instances, structures have been assigned ritual significance. These include the Great Bath and Fire Atlas found at Kalibanga. Great Bath and Fire Atlas found at Kalibanga and Lothal. Attempts have also been made to reconstruct religious beliefs and practices by examining seals, some of which seem to depict ritual scenes. Others with plant motifs are thought to indicate nature worship. Some animals, such as one-horned animal, often called unicorn depicted on seals, seem to be mythical, composite creatures. In some seals, a figure shown seated cross-legged in a yogic posture, sometimes surrounded by animals, has been regarded as depiction of Proto-Shiva. That is an early form of one of the major deities of the Hinduism. Besides colonial uh, conical stone objects have been classified as lingas. Many reconstructions of Harappan religion are made on the assumption that later traditions provide parallels with earlier ones. This is because archaeologists often move from the known to the unknown, that is, from the present to the past. While this is possible in the case of Western cuisines and both, it becomes more speculative when we extend it to religious symbols. Let us look, for instance, at the Proto-Siva seals. The earliest religious text, the Rig Veda, compiled 1500 to 1000 BC, mentions a god named Rudra, which is name used for for Shiva in later Puranic tradition. In the first millenniums, however, unlike Shiva, Rudra in the Rig Veda is neither depicted as Pasupati, lord of animals in general, and cattle in particular, nor as yogi. In other words, this depiction does not match the depiction of Rudra in the Rig Veda. Is this then possibly a summon, as some scholars have suggested? A linga is polished stone that is worshipped as a symbol of Shiva. Okay, linga. Oh, finally, we are about to end. Uh, Shamans Shamans are men and women who claim magical and healing powers as well as an ability to communicate with other worlds. What has been achieved after so many decades of archaeological work? We have a fairly good idea of Harappan economy. We have been able to tease out social differences and we have some idea of how the civilization functioned. It is really not clear how much more we would know if the script were to be deciphered, if a bilingual inscription is found. Questions about the languages spoken by Harappans could perhaps be put to rest. Several reconstructions remain speculative at present. Was the Great Bath a ritual structure? How widespread was literacy? Why do Harappa symmetry so little social differentiation? Also unanswered are questions on gender. Did women make pottery or did they only bend pots? At present, what about other craftspersons? What would the terracotta figurines used for? Very few scholars have investigated issues of gender in the context of Harappan civilization, and this is a whole new area of the for the future. This is what Mackay, one of the earliest excavators, had to say about those stones. There is a small cones made of lapis lazuli jasper. So here we have finished this first chapter. Now king, farmers and towns. Now let me check. How much pages do we need to cover in chapter 2? So first chapter was having 26 pages. This one is having somehow some near about 24. Kings, farmers and towns, early states and economies. There were several developments in different parts of the subcontinent during the long span of 1500 years following the end of the Harappan civilization. This was also a period during which the Rigveda was composed. Okay, by people living along the Indus and its tributaries. Agricultural settlements emerged in many parts of the subcontinent, including North India, the Deccan Plateau, and the parts of Karnataka. Besides, there is evidence of pastoral populations in the Deccan and further south. New modes of disposal of the dead, including the making of elaborate stone structures known as megaliths, emerged in the central. First one, in many cases, the dead were buried with a rich range of iron tools and weapons. From 6th century BC, there is evidence that there were other trends as well. Perhaps the most visible was the emergence of early states, powers, and kingdoms. Underlying these political processes were other changes evident in the ways in which agricultural production was organized. Simultaneously, new towns appeared most throughout the subcontinent. Historians attempt to understand these developments by drawing on a range of sources, inscriptions, texts, coins, and visual material. As we will see, this is a complex process. You will also notice that these sources do not tell the entire story. The scriptures Sachi Madhya Pradesh, Priship and Priyadasi. Some of the most momentous developments in Indian epigraphy took place in 1830s. This was when James Princip, an officer in the Mint of the East India Company, decipher what Brahmi and Crosti to script used in earliest inscription and coins. He found that most of these means refer to there were a few inscriptions which also refer to the king as Asoka, one of the most rulers known for from the Buddhist text.